Well, hello, Love Faith family. Welcome to the Mental Health Hour. I'm your host, Felicia Fischhoff, registered psychotherapist and founder of Rooted in Resilience Psychotherapy and Wellness. And I'm also a proud mama of two lovely boys. Every Tuesday, we gather here to have honest, healing conversations. And sometimes they're even hard conversations, especially as it relates to our mental health. And tonight's Insight Hour is no exception. Tonight, we are diving deep into the theme unpacking transgenerational trauma in the Black community, what we carry, and how we heal. This is a conversation that has been long overdue because the pain we carry didn't start with us. But guess what? Healing can. And I am honored. When I say honored, I am honored to be joined tonight by the incredible Dr. Natasha Williams, a radical self-care and leadership expert, registered psychologist, and one of the founding clinical directors of Allied Psychological Services, an anti-oppressive, multi-ethnic, multilingual practice based right here in Toronto. Dr. Williams is also an international speaker, trainer, best-selling author, and certified DEI facilitator. You've likely seen her sharing her brilliance on CTV News, CBC, and in publications like Chatelaine and The Globe and Mail. She's the author of Embracing Selfishness, It's Not What You Think, and You Are Not Every Woman. And she's passionate about blending clinical wisdom, lived experience, and faith to help folks create real transformative change. Now, tonight, we're talking about the emotional and psychological weight that gets passed down in families and what it really takes to name, hold, and heal that pain. So, if you've ever felt like you're carrying wounds that don't belong to you, or if you've been doing the work to break generational cycles and just need someone to say, I see you, this is the space for you. So call up your sister, your brother, your partner, your cousin, your mama, and bring your full self to this conversation because we're about to unpack some truths together. But before we begin, a gentle reminder. This show is for educational and community building purposes only. It is not a substitute for personalized mental health care. If anything we share tonight strikes a deep chord within you or brings up something for you, please reach out to a local therapist, support group, or community resource. You don't have to do this alone. Support is out there for you. So, without further ado, Dr. Natasha Williams, thank you so much for joining us today on the Mental Health Hour.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
Oh my goodness. When I say that I admire this woman, she has been a trailblazer in our province, in our city, and beyond. And, when the Love Bay family handed me this torch, when I thought about some of the voices that I wanted to speak to our Love Bay community, Dr. Natasha Williams was one of the first people that came to my mind. And so, Dr. Natasha, I love you so much. I respect you so much. And thank you for gracing us with your presence tonight. I am so excited, girl.
I'm so happy to share with the community. I think,
Yeah,
that I think is one of the most important things that we are created to do. We're not
absolutely.
created to live this life alone. We are created as beings to share our wisdom
Yes,
and our knowledge and what gifts God has given us. So
yes,
having that ability to share so that community and from a communal perspective that we can elicit healing, I think is
yes.
the best thing that we can do.
Honestly, community is everything. And
Hmm.
I'll always say that, right? And so I know that when I saw the topic, when I asked you what's been on your heart, and you mentioned transgenerational trauma, I was like, "Ooh, child, yes."
Yes, yes, yes.
So, why don't you break it down for our Love Bay community, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
what is transgenerational trauma and how do you see it show up in the Black community?
Mm-hmm. So, what I want to preface, I'm just going to actually make sure that I have a really solid way of
Yes.
explaining this,
Yes.
because, and before I actually give like a textbook definition and stuff like,
Yes.
I will say unapologetically,
Yes.
if our community does not understand this, then our
Mm.
healing is going to be limited.
Girl, you need to say that again. Say that again.
If our community does not understand
Yes.
transgenerational trauma and what it looks like, our
Yes.
healing will be hampered, right?
Mm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
interestingly enough, I was speaking to, I do some facilitation and consultation for therapists
Yes.
who are looking at a culturally adaptive cognitive behavioral therapy model for Black populations.
Yes.
And I told them, I said, all of the interventions are great, but if you don't
Mm.
understand emotional reactions to transgenerational trauma, you really will have difficulty understanding the person that's in front of you and their
Yes.
reactions. You may then interpret it as
Mm.
resistance when it's actually protection. And it
Yes.
was learned as protection. So if
Yes.
you don't understand the basis of transgenerational trauma,
Mm-hmm.
then you're losing out on understanding the full individual. So I wanted to even
Yes.
start there because I think as a
Yes.
community, we have to understand that the things that we have been taught, I'm not
Yes.
going to say that they are negative, they served its purpose
Mm-hmm.
for the generation that needed it.
Yes. Yes.
But what happens is that we've taken those lessons and continue to learn them because we needed to survive,
Yes.
right?
Absolutely.
Now, the thing is that some of those things that we have learned are not serving us in our present, but it is
Mm-hmm.
all we know to remain protected, because
Yes.
a lot of times vulnerability is seen as not only weakness, it also could be seen as death. You would have
Yes.
died if you were vulnerable,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So I wanted to start out there first before I went into dove into like
Woo!
a huge
Yep.
definition of
Absolutely.
transgenerational trauma. So
Yeah.
I just want to, the textbook way to talk about it. So, and
Yes.
I'll just read it just to make sure we have that proper context. So,
Yes.
transgenerational trauma, or a lot of times you'll hear intergenerational trauma. So, also just
Mm-hmm.
make sure you see that, right?
Yes.
It's the idea that the effects of trauma don't stop with the person who experiences it. Trauma can
Mm.
shape how people parent, how families communicate, and even how future generations respond to stress. So
Yes.
we don't have to be the ones who were the recipients of the trauma. The
Yes.
emotional impact will
Mm-hmm.
transcend from generation to generation. So that's the very basic um,
Yes.
definition of transgenerational trauma.
Yes.
Now let's look at Black families.
Girl.
If
Yes.
we look at Black community, if we talk about the history of enslavement, if we talk
Mm.
about the history of systemic racism and those
Mm-hmm.
sorts of things, when we look at what has been passed down, for example, hypervigilance,
Yep.
emotional suppression,
Yes.
a sense of danger, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Even if the next generation hasn't lived through it, you've been taught this is how you survive. So
Yeah.
these are the things that are going to be important to you. So
Absolutely.
being able to suppress emotion
Mm-hmm.
is actually going to be important,
Yes.
because if I don't suppress emotion and show emotion, I was
Mm-hmm.
seen as weak. And in
Yes.
generations past, you would have been killed.
Yes.
So
Yes.
learn that, let us suppress emotion. So showing emotion is not something that we are going to use to survive.
Yes.
We have to suppress. Hypervigilance is another one. We had to be always cognizant of our surroundings, because who knew
Absolutely.
where danger was coming from? So
Absolutely.
that hypervigilance was taught and brought down from generation to generation as a way to say,
Yeah.
this is how our community survives.
Yes. Yeah.
If you were not completely aware of your surroundings, ultimately it meant death.
Absolutely.
So these are the things we had to learn.
Absolute. Girl, you just dropped a big piece of dumpling right now on the plate, right out the gate. And I love it. And Love Bay family, the chat is for you. So if you have questions, please feel free to comment. You talk about survival.
Mm,
And I think that we all have an embodied sense that we're in survival mode, but we don't actually understand how it's playing out in our day to day.
mhm,
What are some of the things that you've seen in your work as a psychologist, and especially as someone who has, worked with so many individuals that have experienced racial trauma? How have you seen, these survival instincts coming up for the Black community?
mhm. Well, one of the big things that I see is,
Hmm.
I call it putting on a mask. And I'll
Yes.
say it like that because many people believe, and this is like in the workplace or in these social environments,
Mm-hmm.
if I show my true blackness,
Hmm.
I will be ostracized.
Yes.
So instead, what I do is I temper my blackness, don't
Mm-hmm.
show everything. Code switching is a huge protective factor.
Absolutely.
So I cannot use any certain lingos or ways that I would speak that would be comfortable for me. I
Mm-hmm.
need to ensure that I speak in certain prose, certain ways,
Mm-hmm.
so that I can look like that I blend in enough.
Yes.
Because if they don't understand me, they'll also then make assumptions about me. So I
Yes.
need to code switch to protect myself. Certain
Yes.
items of clothing, I also call it as a form of code switching. If I look
Mm-hmm.
too ethnic,
Mm-hmm.
then there are certain ways that I'll be treated in the workplace, which again is all part and parcel of systemic institutionalized racism.
Yes.
I have
Absolutely.
clients basically tell me that, and clients coming from several different countries. This one person in
Yeah.
particular is coming from India,
Yeah.
and she said that she had to get rid of all of her saris because
Mm.
when she came to Canada
Yep.
and she was working at a community health center,
Mm-hmm.
they would chastise her for wearing these brightly colored clothing. So she said,
Mm.
"Well, I guess if this doesn't work in Canada, I'm just going to have to wear black."
Yeah.
So
Yep.
she said to fit in and to not stick out,
Mm-hmm.
she changed her clothing.
Uh-huh.
So these are some of the ways. Hair is also a huge one
Girl.
as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know,
Absolutely.
certain hairstyles are seen as inappropriate,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, too ethnic, um,
Mm.
not professional.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that so you go into a work environment and you feel that you have to only don your hair in certain ways to be
Yes.
seen, to be taken seriously. Now here's
Mm-hmm.
the other thing as well, there's also
Yes.
people in our own community that embody that too, right? I mean, I know that might be another topic for another day, but
Woo! Yeah. No.
it's something where, for example, I have a cousin who decided she wanted to start loxing her hair, and
Mm.
she works in a very multicultural work setting.
Yes.
And as she started her journey,
Mm-hmm.
it was another Black individual who basically said, "Are you sure you want to do that? Your hair doesn't look neat.
Mm.
Do you think that's going to look professional?" So she started second guessing her
Yes.
journey to
Yes.
have her hair grow out of her head the way that she was born,
Wow.
right?
Wow. Yeah.
She did embrace her journey, so she didn't listen to the gentleman. Her locks are nice and long and flowing. She could wrap
Ooh.
them up and everything. And I
Yeah.
said, "Thank you for taking that journey,
Yeah.
because the way that your hair grows out of your head should not be a taboo, and someone else in the community should not be chastising you for that too." But again, another conversation
Absolutely.
for another day.
Oh, no, all very important stuff, right? Because even as you're talking, the things that's coming to my mind is, how do we actually choose to be authentic,
Mm,
and be our authentic, true and authentic selves when we're faced with various oppressions? Because I know we were talking about survival, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And even though it might not be as ab- abrupt as slavery, and you're
Mhm.
actually losing your life, there's still things that relate to our survival that are at stake. So
Yeah.
when it's like you were talking about the client, right, with the sorry, this is her place of work, this is how she survives, this is how she can you know eat.
Right.
And then it's like, what options do we have as
Mhm.
people of color, as Black women or as Black men, um, and how do we show up in the world?
Right. Right. I mean, I think that's a difficult question, and it won't
Yeah,
necessarily have a clean response because
absolutely.
I think you have to look at a couple of things. There is, the whole notion of survival.
Yeah,
Looking at, this is what puts food on the table, clothes on my back,
yeah,
those sorts of things. Right.
absolutely.
What I do end up questioning when I have clients that are coming to me, they're also in a place of distress, which means
Hmm.
regardless that this is a place that puts food on the table, they're losing their soul in the midst of it,
Yes.
right? So we now have to come up with strategies for them to reclaim self. And in the
Mhm.
midst of reclaiming self, they may have to go into battle.
Yes.
They may.
Yes.
Um,
Hmm.
and the thing is, I tell people, and I've said this before, I go, discomfort has to have a home,
Yes.
okay?
Yeah,
Which means if you've been living with being mute for years, you've been ingesting the discomfort for years while
exactly.
making everyone else around you comfortable.
Yes,
If
absolutely.
you're going to now start to channel your healing,
Hmm.
it means that that discomfort has to be released from what you've been swallowing and has to be put out there. So
Yes.
other people have to start feeling that discomfort. Now, what does
Hmm.
that mean? I'm not going to sit here and say, do something to get you fired,
Yep.
because, but then, again, that's another issue. But
Hmm.
if there is blatant rights that are being infringed upon as a result of, for this individual wearing a sari, there's nothing in the code of conduct that says that this woman could not wear a sari.
Hmm.
There were individuals who were colonial minded
Yep.
who decided to try to make her feel uncomfortable because they were uncomfortable seeing her in all her glory.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the minute that they opened up their mouth and said something, they transferred their discomfort onto her. And then
Yes.
she started to second guess. If
Hmm.
she now comes back and we empower her
Hmm.
to say, this is who I am, this is my traditional dress, whatever the case may be, what you
Yes.
do is transfer that discomfort back to them. They now have to check themselves,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And then you release that concern at that point in time because their discomfort is not your concern. The
Hmm.
minute that you ingest that discomfort, you're telling them that how they're feeling or their discomfort is your primary responsibility.
Yes.
Absolutely. So this is what we start to do to start to retrain and reframe mindset in
Hmm.
order to navigate these environments that might
Yeah.
be difficult. So I'm not saying that this is not something that is difficult. That's not difficult.
Yes.
We're looking at spaces in which there's potential for conflict
Hmm.
because other people are taking their discomfort and saying, "Can you take this for me, please? Because it's too much for me to bear."
Absolutely.
Looking at it from a philosophical perspective. At the end
Absolutely.
of the day, Felicia, I talk about it's not about surviving, it's about we have been born and bred to thrive. But
Mm.
we've been suppressed to think that survival is only our portion.
Yes.
Absolutely not.
Yes. What does thriving
Hmm.
look like?
Right. So go back to what you mentioned about
Hmm.
being our true and authentic self, being able to have the
Yeah.
ability to walk in our true self, wear your hair the way you want to, don the clothes that you want to,
Yes.
listen to the music that you want to, eat the food that you want to,
Yes.
whatever it is. Because remember, your embodiment of blackness may be different from somebody else. So nobody can dictate to you what your blackness is.
Yes.
So thriving means I walk in my own light.
Yes.
I choose how I want to walk, what do I want to embody, what do I want to eat, where, listen to, all
Yes.
of those kinds of things. Whom I want to have around me,
Yes.
because thriving also means cultivating the environment that supports your journey, your endeavors,
Yes.
right? Thriving also means plucking away or cutting off those ones that do not serve you or don't have the mindset to understand who you are, right?
Mm.
That's so it's always something that you continue to cultivate. It's not necessarily just a one-time thing, right?
Yes.
Thriving is something you continue to cultivate because you continue to survey what is around you and
Yeah.
continue to do that same inner surveying as well. What is
Yes.
serving me? What is no longer serving me?
Yes.
What what makes me happy?
Yeah.
What fulfills me?
Yes.
Right? That's what thriving is about. When you're just in survival mode, you get to a space where you're like, how do I just get to the next day?
Mm.
Right? There's no joy. These are people that, for example, you always hear people that talk about just going to a job because it just pays the bills and that's it.
Yep.
No, and I'm not saying you have to absolutely love your job, but if your existence on this earth is to just say, I need to go to this job to pay bills, and there's no joy in
Mm.
anything that you're doing, because we spend a lot of time at work, for example,
Yes.
then
Yes.
you are in a survival mode.
Yes.
And if we look at our history, this is what a lot of people don't recognize. If
Yes.
we dove into our Black history and
Mm-hmm.
look at the lineage that we came from, then
Yes.
people would understand that we have a kingdom
Mm-hmm.
lineage,
Yes.
right? So it depends on what you believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we look at, just history and sort of African history and
Yes.
look at the kings and queens that we've come from and that lineage,
Mm.
we wouldn't be accepting the mediocrity that the colonizer had decided to feed us,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
If you are somebody who practices certain religions,
Yes.
for example, Christianity, you
Yes.
would know that mediocrity is not your portion when
Mm-hmm.
when you decide that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior and that's who
Yes.
you serve, which
Yes.
means you come from a lineage of
Yes.
royalty.
Yes. Yes.
Right? So when you start embodying those things, you know that mediocrity and anything less is not your portion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these are just examples.
Yes.
There's a woman. I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna get her name right. I think her name is Hatshepsut,
Mm-hmm.
Queen Hatshepsut. I think I'm,
Yes.
I'm pronouncing her name wrong. But not only was she a queen, but she
Mm-hmm.
also, if I'm not mistaken, was one of the first empresses of Egypt.
Mm.
And the reason she became empress is because the lineage was supposed to be only men,
Mm-hmm.
but she was supposed to be next in line, but they were going to jump over her because she was a woman. And
Mm.
she said, not on my watch.
That's right.
So she said, no, 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 I will be the next queen, right?
Yes.
And I'm going to rule this nation. So
Yes.
said, so done, right? And if
Wow.
we look at that as our lineage in terms of African heritage, I
Yes.
mean, come on.
Yes.
If I know that that's my lineage, why would I accept anything less? And that's just one
Yes.
example, right?
Yes.
A lot of times when we don't understand our history, we
Mm.
we take on whatever is force fed to us.
Yes.
So
Yes.
our history is so important to learn, and
Mm.
I continue to learn in order
Yes.
to continue to fortify
Yes.
my queenness. I'll say
Yes.
that flat out.
Yes. I love that. Fortifying your queenness.
Hmm.
You know, as you're sharing about our royal lineage, and, as I reflect on, even my work with clients, there's sometimes that, many of us, we want to walk in um, our excellence,
Mm.
right? But the systems around them, like, for example, they could be doing double the amount of their coworker, doing it with excellence, doing going above and beyond, but yet they're still overlooked.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What would you say to listeners that feel deflated, defeated, knowing that they have all this purpose locked up in the inside of them, but they feel shut down?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think that's an excellent question,
Mhm.
because that's the same
Yeah,
mentality or message that was given to me growing up.
yeah,
You know, you need to work twice as hard in order to get the same recognition.
yeah,
Going through school, it was the same thing.
yeah,
I did my internship at at the hospital, the mental health hospital here in Toronto.
yeah,
Seven interns, and I was the only black woman, black
yeah,
person, period.
yeah.
Right? And then somebody had the audacity, and it was most likely white fragility.
Mm,
She had the audacity to sit and say the reason I received an internship was because I was a token hire, right?
mm,
So, um, having being in that space where I'm like, I'm gonna have to prove myself anyway. So I was always the first
yeah,
one, the last one out, or whatever the case may be.
yeah,
A lot of times you do feel deflated or defeated because
yeah.
you're in a space where you believe that the only way your excellence will shine is if you burn the candle at both ends. You're not in
Mm,
the right environment.
yeah.
Your star will truly shine when it connects with the environment that you're supposed to be in. So
Yes.
sometimes I have to get into a space where, yes, I was at the mental health hospital here in Toronto. I was doing an internship, but it was a means to an end,
Mm,
right? So yes, I was working twice as hard. Yes, this is what was being told to me, but I knew it was for a time. I needed to finish my degree,
mm-hmm.
right? and
Yeah,
then and then what happened from there is then I had to shift environments. i left
yeah,
i, I left the hospital right after and started in private practice.
yes,
But from there, a lot of times your excellence has to meet the environment that you're in for you to actually really glow and shine. And on top
yes,
of that, sometimes, so I say that on one end.
yes,
On the other end, I will say this: sometimes the environment will shift for you because you come in with your excellence. I don't necessarily have to work twice as hard. I walk into the room knowing who I am,
mm,
right? And the
yes,
environment has to shift around me. So I started teaching at the Adler School here. This is close soon after as I graduated, and I
mm-hmm.
remember walking into the room, and no one knew that I was the professor. They just thought I was the student. And then I walked up to the front, and you just saw jaws starting to drop because, quote unquote, I don't
Mm-hmm.
I don't look like a psychologist. You don't look like a psychologist. I was
Mm,
so they were expecting something else.
mm-hmm.
Then I opened up my mouth and started to teach.
Yes,
And that was all. That was it. Because when you walk in your excellence, the environment has to shift,
yes,
right? And if it
mm-hmm.
doesn't want to shift, please do not force something that is not meant to be something permanent. Don't force it.
Mm-hmm.
I always talk about reason, season, lifetime,
Yes,
right? There might be a certain reason, or it might be for just a season. And
yes,
after that season, you're not meant to be in that environment for a
yes,
sustained period of time. You either learn your lessons and go, or they learn their lessons and they'll go.
yes,
So if you feel overwhelmed, if you're feeling defeated or deflated,
yes,
I would say that, um, check and see what stage you're in that environment.
yes,
If it's
yes,
if it's just for a season, you then shift your mindset, understanding that this is not your permanent home,
yes, yes.
and then you prepare for where your next steps are going to be.
Absolutely. What I love that about what you're saying is that we don't have to necessarily see ourselves as being stuck.
No, not at all. Not at all. Because I think when you start to see yourself as stuck,
Yeah.
that's when we talk about depressive, anxious symptomatology, that's when it becomes entrenched because it's now connected to hopelessness.
Yes.
Hopelessness is one of the huge things that as psychologists we look at when we're diagnosing depression, for example.
Yes. Yes.
If you're now if it's now entrenched in hopelessness, that's
Yes.
where you see a lot of that's where I see a lot of symptoms, that's where I see a lot of diagnoses,
Yes.
because it just makes it hard to think that, this can be anything different. If
Mm.
I can shift, if we can shift ways of thinking and ways of knowing to understand that this is not something that's permanent,
Hmm.
right? That change can happen. So I was working with
Yes.
quite a few clients, especially in the workplace,
Yes.
where they feel like, oh my goodness, I'm stuck. When you're able to say, okay, you're in this position, you've been in it for some time, where do you see your next steps? And for them to start to embody what things look like outside of that environment is actually
Yes.
gives them the strength to sort of remain there and
Yeah.
remain there for a season, because they're
Yeah.
then now looking at, this is not the only place I need to be.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I, I know that I love that you're talking about the power of mindset,
Hmm.
right? Because when I think through what you've been mentioning about our history and how it passes down from generation to generation, right?
Hmm.
What are your thoughts on the mindset that we still carry as a people? And how do we begin to break the cycle?
Mm. Ooh.
Yes, Chan.
Yes, it's a huge one, because
Yeah.
someone said the saying to me, or said this to me, and
Hmm.
it hit me like a ton of bricks. And it's just a friend of mine, and we were just having a chat. They're not a mental health professional or anything.
Hmm.
Um, they said something to the effect of, slavery was the best manipulative tool because it still goes on today.
Hmm.
And I said, "Oh, really?"
Hits you in the gut. You're like,
It does.
ugh.
And then he prefaced it by saying that physical enslavement may have been banned, but mental slavery still goes on. So the effects of enslavement still embodies our community today. So a
Yes.
lot of times what we need to release is colonial mindsets. Mindsets
Hmm.
that have been entrenched and embodied in our psyche and in the way we think, in the way we talk and believe and act.
Yes.
Those are the things I think that we need to start unraveling.
Yes.
Easier said than done, because some people
Hmm.
don't even believe that their mindset is colonial. They just
Hmm.
think that this is better. We
Yeah.
just have to look at some nations that look at, for example, we talk about shadism and colorism and those
Hmm.
types of themes,
Yes.
where anything that's closer to a European aesthetic is what is championed and what is revered, and
Hmm.
anything that is closer to an African aesthetic is looked down upon.
Absolutely.
Right? This is where you have, for example, the skin bleaching
Yep.
industry that
Yep.
makes billions of dollars a year
Hmm.
on a colonial mindset that being too dark is actually a problem.
Hmm. And this is across cultures. This is not
Yes,
just with our culture. You see this in the Asian culture, the South
South
Asian
Asian
culture. It
yes.
is a thing.
Yes, and that is all rooted in colonial mindset. Anything to,
Hmm.
anything to get a community to believe that the closer that you are to a Eurocentric way of being, of living, or looking,
Yes.
is what is preferred. Now, the reason for that from a colonial mindset is because if we talk about enslavement and talk about
Hmm.
how slave masters were raping our community and those kinds of things, and then you were
Yes.
having children who were mixed,
Yep.
or mixed race,
Hmm.
if they came out and they were closer to a European aesthetic, or they could pass, it
Yep.
means that they were able to get better privileges. This
Yep.
is where we talked about things such as the field Negro versus the house Negro. The
Yep.
one that was in the house was seen to have more privileges, but a lot of times they could pass and be lighter skinned
Yep.
because they were lighter skinned.
Yes.
So, in that sense, imagine that base
Yes.
mindset is what we're basically carrying today. Anything
Hmm.
that is close to that European aesthetic way of being, way of thinking, knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
um, is ends up being revered, and anything that is seen as indigenous, Black indigenous, African indigenous, is
Yes.
seen as secondary.
Yes.
Just go to the Caribbean and you'll see that as well. If you don't speak the Queen's English, then you're
Mm-hmm.
not seen as intelligent. If you're
Yes.
speaking um, patois, Creole,
Mm-hmm.
languages that are more indigenous to the community, then
Yes.
you're not seen as intelligent, or it's seen
Mm-hmm.
as a secondary language, or sometimes it's not even classified as
Mm-hmm.
a language, right? So you
Yes.
have to get closer to the Queen's English, to
Yep.
the European way of being, the way of living,
Mm.
in order to get certain benefits in
Yes.
life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what do we need to do to unravel that? There has to be, first of all,
Yes.
an enlightening or an understanding that we have been colonially brainwashed.
Yes.
Our Black community has been colonially brainwashed.
Mm-hmm.
And once we even can even acknowledge that, if we can, because some people in the community cannot, they'll just say, no, this is just the way things are and that's it. But if we understand that, then we can come to the space of loving who we are as Black community, period, end of discussion,
Yes.
without compromise.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, that's where we start to unravel some of these notions that, our nose is too broad, our lips are too thick, our hips are too wide, our behind is too big.
Yes.
We're too loud,
Yeah.
we're too, right?
Yes.
Because that makes other people uncomfortable. This is just who we are,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. Girl, you are hitting the nail on the head tonight. You know, as you were talking, earlier, about even just like the workplace, right? And being able to speak up for yourself. I think that we have to start this work first,
Mm-hmm.
that journey of self love and that journey of understanding who we are,
Yeah.
right? Because otherwise, we won't be willing to self advocate for us because we only advocate and fight for what we love.
And that's very, very true. If you look at Dr. Joy DeGroy's work,
Mhm.
she speaks a lot about transgenerational trauma, but also how,
Yeah.
we can look at, as therapists or as such, how we actually start to treat and work with it. One of
Yes.
the things that she does say in her book
Yes.
is that, to know thyself is actually going to be key. If
Mm.
you understand who you are and what your history is,
Yes.
that ends up being one of the first places where healing starts to ensue, because if you
Yes.
understand your community, you wouldn't hate on those things.
Absolutely.
Understanding where you came from and those kinds. So know thyself is actually one of her tenets that she talks
Mm.
about in addressing transgenerational trauma.
Yeah. We have to put in the work.
We
It
do.
takes intentionality.
We do. And the thing is, we cannot accept what we've been fed. That's the thing. So if we think about it from going all the way back to the education system, where you've been educated. I'm educated here. I'm
Mm-hmm.
educated in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I got my doctorate in the US. For
Mm-hmm.
me to become the person that I am today and still learning, I
Mm.
had to unlearn and relearn a lot of things, because I had to
Mm.
understand that my training, what I've learned, is based in Eurocentric, westernized principles and practices,
Yes.
and things were omitted intentionally in order for me not to see my full self as a Black woman. Because
Absolutely.
so if I only had to rely on the public education system,
Mm-hmm.
not just with public school, but undergrad, master's, doctorate, if I only had to rely on that, there would
Yes.
be gaping holes in my knowledge, because that is what the education system is there to do. They only
Mm-hmm.
want to give you what they think is necessary
Yes.
versus what is out there. So a lot of when you do a lot of study in
Mm.
psychology,
Yes.
You talk about the Freuds and the Adlers and the Youngs, which again, great, but where are my, Frantz Fanons, and
Mm-hmm.
where are my scholars from the continent who were
Yes.
contributing to psychology at the time, right?
Yes.
If I did not sit there and sort of look and say, well, where are my other scholars and what were their contributions to,
Mm-hmm.
African liberation and African thought process and those kinds of things, if I didn't even look at them and continue to look for them,
Yes.
my basis for psychological practice and
Mm-hmm.
ways of healing would only be coming from a Eurocentric perspective. So then I'm using Eurocentric perspectives to heal
Mm.
my community. How
Yes.
how fair is that?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you know better, you do better. And you
Yes.
continue to want to learn,
Yes.
continue to start diving into your history. So when I was doing my undergrad, for example, I did Psychology 101,
Yes.
Adler, Jung, Freud, all of them things, Skinner, all of them,
Uh-huh.
Bandura. But then I decided, as part of my bachelor's degree, you could take courses outside
Mm-hmm.
of your requirements for psychology. So
Mm-hmm.
I decided to take African history.
Mm.
I took Caribbean history,
Yes.
right? Feminist thought,
Yes.
philosophy for that matter.
Yes.
Because philosophy, even though they'll talk about these Greek philosophers and that kind of thing, what it does is it allows you to start to shift your mind in different ways of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
It's something as simple as, is that a chair you're sitting on? Why do you know it's a chair? Who identified it as a chair? It just blows your
Mm-hmm.
mind.
Yes.
But the thing is it allows you to think differently. I
Mm-hmm.
took all of these history courses because the history of my community was important. And
Yeah.
yes, it was just one course, but it set me on the trajectory to say, what I'm learning in psychology, that's not it, and it's not alone. That's not it.
Yeah.
There's so
Yes.
much more to it. And there's
Yes.
things that they're omitting.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
So when you know thyself and know what your history is, you can't accept mediocrity because
No.
we didn't come from mediocrity.
Absolutely. And, I know that you were talking about the intentional removal of our history, right? And again, I think that this is where that mindset comes in, right? Because we haven't actually seen the greatness.
Yeah, yeah,
We have to go searching to find the history of
yeah.
our greatness so that we could see ourselves the
Yes,
way that we ought to see ourselves.
absolutely. I mean, I will say that I was very, very fortunate growing up. So I grew up in Markham,
Mm-hmm.
and I went to, shout out to my high school, Milliken Mills High School.
Yeah.
But what was fascinating is my school was the only school at the time that had an African history class
Mm.
that we were able to take for our high school credit. So
Wow.
you still have to take your Canadian history and Canadian geography, but they had an African history class
Mm.
taught by an African professor, African
Wow.
teacher, that was good for high school credit. That's where the wheel started turning for me from the
Yes.
education perspective, because
Yes.
you saw what was being taught in the Canadian history class and then
Mm-hmm.
what was taught in the African history class. You're like, who?
Mm.
Even
Mm-hmm.
my 16-year-old self knew
Yes.
that there were some holes that were going on in there. And I
Mm-hmm.
deliberately put myself in that class because I wanted to learn more.
Yes.
And so that's where it started in high school, then in university, and then
Yes.
kept on going from there. Um, but again, we have an education system that is being fed to our children, but
Yes.
it's not fulfilling our children. There's a difference between
Yes.
fed and being fulfilled, and our children
Mm.
are not seeing themselves in the education system, and that's
Yes.
and that's done on purpose. If
Yes.
we can if we
Absolutely.
could infiltrate these children's minds from now,
Hmm.
They won't know their level of greatness. I'll be very honest. I think
Yeah.
it's a way to continue to suppress our community, because if we truly knew who we were,
Yep.
people would be very, very scared, because they would think there'd be like a mutiny, or some kind of revolt,
Absolutely.
because we wouldn't tolerate half the stuff that they would be trying to do to us.
Absolutely. And I think I've heard recently about some Black history curriculum being pulled out of the
Yeah,
school system,
yeah.
right? So it's still happening,
Yeah.
right?
So what's interesting is that from what I've seen, they were supposed to implement Black History curriculum, I think in grade 7
Hmm.
or so. And that bill did pass, and it was supposed to be integrated into the curriculum. I
Hmm.
don't know if that now has hit some kind of snag, or they're reevaluating it or something, but it
Yeah.
sounds like that there's a delay in implementing it.
Hmm.
So we'll see.
Right.
We'll see what happens. Again, I'm not 100% sure, but I did hear
Yeah.
something, Felicia. I did hear something similar to that as well, where
Yeah.
they're delaying the implementation of it now.
Yeah. Right. And how do, like, I'm sure a lot of our Love Bay listeners are parents, or they have younger siblings or cousins. Like, how do they begin, this journey of not only understanding the history themselves,
Mhm.
but breaking the patterns of transgenerational trauma in the family, starting
Mhm.
from the littles?
Yeah. The first way to start breaking transgenerational trauma, to be honest, is the first thing I look at is what we call get curious and not judgmental. And the
Mm,
reason I say that is because a lot of times transgenerational trauma passes from generation to generation due to silence. And it's so we believe that if nothing is said, then it's 100% truth, and we just have to keep on living it.
yep.
So
Yep.
the first place is to say, get curious. It's to start to observe. And again, not judgmental. So you're not going to, sit there and get upset with other people or that kind
Yeah.
of thing. You want to start by observing and sort of say,
Yeah.
this is how I see, this is how I saw my father deal with certain things, or this is
Yes.
how I noticed my mom, not say something when if somebody got really angry,
Yes.
this is I want to start doing those observations, right? Because it's in that we start to notice, and that to me is where our
Yes.
first piece is going to be, because what it does is now start to break up the silence of it,
Mm,
and also the belief that it's taboo,
yes.
right?
Yep.
So the thing is look at it, observe it, and not don't be judgmental about it.
Hmm.
That's sort of our first space, I think, is going to be our first space or foray into starting to ensure that we have a space in order to start really breaking this down.
Yes. And that is not easy, because we don't want to look at our family systems, and we don't want to
Mm-mm.
look at the patterns, because,
Well,
especially
we all
as,
well, but we also don't want to feel that we're going to be reprimanded by looking at the systems as well,
yes,
right? So
exactly.
that's the other piece. So you have this piece where you're like, if I say something, am I going to be reprimanded, right? Um,
Yes.
so sometimes, again, it's what we call a gentle curiosity. So sometimes you may
Yeah.
not have to, because I'm not going to want to necessarily say anything just because I want my parents to change,
Yes.
but I could start, gently asking curious questions, see if I get responses. If you don't get responses, it could be that there's your trauma right there that's being
Yes.
brought down. We don't say anything, we're silent, we don't have to, we don't take time to process emotions or feelings, or whatever the case may be.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So um, it's interesting. I've been reading this book by Dr. Ethan Kross called Shift,
Mm.
and it just talks about emotional intelligence and stuff like that. And one of the book actually begins by talking about
Okay.
his grandmother that went through the Holocaust,
Mm.
and but she would never talk about the Holocaust, never talked about what happened, how her whole family got wiped out, all of that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. How she
Yeah.
she was still able to move to the United States.
Hmm.
And I think um what was it that she said? I think he asked her, he's like, well, why don't you, why don't you talk about it? Because I guess in his mind, her suppressing it was actually causing
Yeah. More
um
pain.
more pain. And
Yeah.
her response was, why is a crooked letter? Just so.
Mm.
And the thing was is that he then had to come to understand that in her silence, that was her way of healing, and she lived a fruitful life
Yes.
without having to process
Mm-hmm.
the trauma.
Yeah. And that's a way to cope. That's a coping mechanism.
Right. And the thing is, sometimes we try to work people out of that coping mechanism, but for her it worked. And
Yeah.
he had to get to a place where he had to understand that that was her way of coping. She
Yeah.
was very choosy in terms of whom she discussed
Mm-hmm.
her experience with. And I think
Yes.
he found out later on after her death that she had some very close individuals
Yes.
that also went through the Holocaust with her. They're the one that they shared.
Mm.
But she wouldn't discuss it with the larger family,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
But that was her way of doing things, right?
Yes.
But the thing is, he became a psychologist himself, and then he's now understanding that, the pattern of, everyone has to release everything and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That was, so everyone has their own ways of coping. So
Yes.
in saying this, because you become curious, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that you necessarily will get all the answers that you need
Yes.
from the individuals that you ask, if they're not necessarily ready or that's not their coping mechanism.
Abs-
Right.
So what I'm hearing is don't get discouraged if
That's
you
right.
start to become a little bit more curious and you get shut out
That's
because
right.
that might be their way to cope and
Exactly.
they're just not ready yet.
Exactly. So for
Hmm.
yourself, then, if you want to start breaking this transgenerational trauma stronghold,
Yes.
the big thing for me is to make the unspoken spoken.
Hmm.
That for me is huge.
Yeah.
Because again, it's in the silence that we keep perpetuating the same thing over and over again.
Hmm.
And I will tell people, putting truth to power, putting words to what has not been spoken, can be a very powerful thing. It doesn't discredit what my parents, my grandparents, what they did.
Hmm.
But what it allows me to now say is, how do I navigate things on my own terms now? Because this silence is no longer serving me. This emotional
Hmm.
suppression is no longer serving me. I
Yes.
now can be in the driver's seat and say, what is it that I need now
Hmm.
to navigate this world as I'm in it,
Hmm.
I see it, right?
Absolutely.
So having that ability to bring things to the surface, to break silence. So one of the most powerful ways to heal is to break the silence,
Yes.
right? Because the
Yes.
silence is what stifles everything, right?
Hmm. Yep.
So, I think that's important. What we so I one of the phrases that I notice is and what I love is,
Yes.
when we name what was never talked about, we open the door to compassion and connection.
Hmm. Yes.
So I love that quote. I wanted to just make sure that I put that in there as well.
No,
So
I think that's powerful. That idea of compassion, right? Because I think a lot of times we don't know how to be compassionate towards
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
ourselves. Hmm.
We don't. We don't, because people have been trying to tell us how to be compassionate, tell us or dictate to us what is it
Yes.
that we need, and not being able to sit back and say, no, what is it that I really do need, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like we have to stop the critics or the critiques or the voices to actually sit with ourselves. Journaling is the best way, I find, is a really good way of doing that, to sort of sit with self and
Yes.
what comes to mind for yourself. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? So,
Yeah.
and I think that's where the path to healing comes in. So one of
Yeah.
the last things I would say, in terms of being able to start to heal from transgenerational trauma.
Mm.
And I just made a note here. It's learn and practice new emotional responses. So healing is not just about looking back, it's about practicing new ways of responding. And
Yes.
that's going to look like different things for different people. So I can look
Mhm.
back, not a problem, understand the source of where things are coming from,
Yes.
but then I need to then say, you know what, I need to chart a new way forward. And again, it's
Mm.
going to look like different things. So for example, I'll give some concrete examples.
Yes.
Setting boundaries without guilt,
Mm-hmm.
setting and maintaining boundaries, because the setting of boundaries is one thing. What
Yeah.
unravels the setting of boundaries or the maintenance of boundaries a lot of times is feeling guilty,
Yep.
because there's some people that don't like those boundaries,
Uh-huh.
right? And they'll guilt you into going back into a person that didn't have any. The minute you
Mm.
set boundaries and you find that somebody's pushing against them, that's the exact reason why you should have had those boundaries in the first place.
Girl, say that again, please.
When you
Absolutely.
set boundaries
Mm.
and you notice that there are certain people that are pushing against those boundaries, it is
Uh-huh.
they're the exact reason you're setting those boundaries in the first place.
Thank you
It is
very
them. It
much.
is them.
Yes.
So it's so important that, so that's one of the ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, learning how to self-soothe when you're anxious or you're triggered, right? Instead of lashing out. What is
Yep.
it that I'm going to need when I'm feeling overwhelmed and anxious? So what do I need? And for
Yes.
some people, it can be, I need to take a step back. I need to take, to take a nice soothing bath. I need to
Mm-hmm.
go pray for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I need to journal. I need to read. I need to do something that I know will soothe and calm my soul.
Yes.
Right. So that's another way. If I'm feeling anxious or overwhelmed, I can then figure what is going to be important for me to soothe myself in
Yes.
a genuine and authentic
Yeah.
and in an adaptive way. Because
Yes.
you'll hear the word self-soothe and then you think of, some people may, drink something, drink
Yeah.
alcohol or eat excessively and stuff like that. We don't want
Yes.
to get into those. We want to look at what are going to be healing adaptive ways to
Yes.
self-soothe. And
Mm-hmm.
the other thing is, we have to start talking about vulnerability as well. I know we won't get into it, but it's asking for help even when it feels vulnerable. Because a
Yes.
lot of times, vulnerability, we avoid vulnerability, and that causes
Yes.
our downfall because we think that
Yeah.
vulnerability is weakness
Yes.
when we can actually harness it as a strength. And then that's when we actually rally the community together instead of being stifled in silence. So those are a
Mm-hmm.
couple of the ways that I would start to even try to address some
Absolutely.
transgenerational trauma.
Absolutely. I love that you gave the practical tips because I know that sometimes it's hard to know, where to start this
Yeah.
work, right?
And it's work. That's
Mhm.
the other thing too. I think people,
Yeah.
it's not a one-stop shop. It's not a one-time thing. It's being very
Yes.
intentional about it
Yes.
as well.
Absolutely. And I love that you talked about vulnerability.
Mm.
We have to take the walls down at least a little bit, just
Yeah.
even just lower it. And I know it's because it's up because we're trying to protect ourselves. I
Yes.
get the reason why it's there,
Yes.
but just can we lower it just a tiny bit
Mm.
so that we can open ourselves up to some more healing,
Yes.
right?
Well, I think first of all, talking about vulnerability is in a whole other show for another day because
And I know.
that could definitely be another show because I think
Absolutely.
in what you're saying, Felicia, is that yes, I think it's important that we lower that down, but in terms of lowering that down, we also have to make sure that the
Yes.
person has the coping
Uh-huh.
capability
Yes.
to address whatever it is coming up within that vulnerability. So if I tell
Absolutely.
people to lower their guard, I need to make sure that I provide them with tools to
That's
address
right.
it, right?
Because things will come up.
That's it. That's it.
For all of us. For
Yeah.
all of
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you wanted to leave one last thing with our listeners tonight, what would you say to them?
The journey to healing from transgenerational trauma
Mm,
is worth it.
yes.
I'm not going to say too much because I think, a lot of times we can feel despondent and despair and don't feel that, that the healing can happen. It
Yeah.
absolutely can. But it's the willingness to take the journey and take the time to understand that you're worth the
Mm.
time to
Mm,
unpack transgenerational trauma.
yes. Well, you've heard it yourself, Love Bay family. You are worth the time. This journey is a process, but it's worth it. You are worth it. Dr. Natasha, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today, and for helping to put our family on a road to healing. And so, thank you. I can't thank you enough. I hope you can have you back another time. Maybe you can hit up that vulnerability piece and some coping skills.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to be back.
Absolutely. And so, thank you, Love Bay family, for listening tonight. And until next time, peace out.